Hello, everyone. My name is Dave Flagler. For those who I haven't met, which is probably many of you at this point, I am the director of Camp JCC and the director of Camp and Teen Engagement for the United Jewish Federation of Tidewater. I want to first of all thank everyone for being here tonight. We know this is a late hour for some, and our session is being recorded. And tonight is many things, but the first thing it is a start of a conversation. We know that there's a lot to consider with all that is happening in the world, all that has happened in the world, and all that we are hoping for this summer. And we don't have to finish the conversation tonight. I invite you to continue this conversation with me via email, via phone, and we'll give some of that information at the end. And the format of tonight's presentation will be a presentation about how we are going to be operating our program while mitigating the spread of COVID-19, updates on the guidance that we've received since our last presentation, and also answer your questions and address any concerns that you have. And we're going to spend some significant time at the end of tonight's session doing that. With that said, we have a question and answer button below, and my colleague and our director of Jewish Innovation at the United Jewish Federation of Tidewater, Sara Lautman, is going to be asking these questions and moderating them at the end. So we will be seeing them. We'll be happy to ask these questions for you and address concerns, but this is just the beginning. With that being said, I think somebody else said that tonight. So with that being said, tonight, this is my fourth time now doing this online presentation. And each time it still feels really weird and really strange for me. So I want you to bear with me on that and just know that it will be that much sweeter when we get back together. And with that being said, while we've heard so much about COVID and all the things that we need to do to prevent that, and we're going to cover all those things, the focus of what we're going to be doing at Camp JCC is caring for our campers' social and emotional development and well-being. Our campers need to go back to being campers. They need to go back to having fun. They need to go back to being kids. So while COVID is there, the mitigation procedures and preventions are just going to be built into the program. We don't want that to be what's hanging over everybody's head. This past summer, myself and a lot of other JCCs decided to call their summer programs not camp, because they didn't want people to be confused by what the experience was last summer with what their camp program truly is. And last summer, a lot of us, most of us didn't know what we now know. But this summer here at Camp JCC and really across the country, we are more committed to camp and Camp JCC than ever before and all that it brings. So again, thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to start sharing some of our information. All right. So one of the things that make our camp really unique in any summer is just the amount of experience that we have on our leadership team. Myself, this is going to be my 10th year either as a director or assistant director of camp. That makes me feel really old, but that's okay. That's neither here nor there. And there's a few other names on this list that many of you might already recognize, either from previous JCC programs or from the Strelitz International Academy or from previous summers at Camp JCC. Sara Cooper, our program manager of Kids Connection, is our camp administrator this summer, and we are just so happy to have her. She's such an amazing asset. You'll hear from Sara, but I will just talk up to her, talk very nicely about her and talk her up about all the amazing things she does. And aside from being such an advocate of what camp is and what it needs to be and all of that benefits, she's also a camp parent, which makes us even more excited. In the early child, and for our early camp, Camp Katan means small in Hebrew. It used to be called Lower Camp. We are excited to welcome Lavette Ricks, who was previously and currently also a teacher at the Strelitz School in the Early Years program. She's going to be our director of Camp Katan. And our previous director of Camp Katan is now being promoted as the incoming director of the Strelitz Early Years program, and that's Alyssa Brennan. She's staying on to help us work through that transition, but she just loves camp. She said, I can't get rid of camp. I'm like, okay, fine. You can stay with camp as long as you want to be with camp. We are also really honored to welcome Caitlin Cipolla, who is going to be our head of Camp Gadol. Caitlin has grown up at camp. She was a counselor. And this is going to be a really wonderful opportunity. We love it when our homegrown kids grow up at camp, become counselors, and emerge into leadership roles. So we're really excited. She has a wealth of knowledge and experience, and we're so happy to have her. A few other names that you might recognize are Mr. Chris Fenley. He's our lead specialist and arts and fishing specialist. He's been at camp for over 20 years and has seen everything, really everything. And he's an amazing asset. When he's not at camp, he works at the Norfolk Public Schools. Michelle Fenley works for Jewish Family Services, but she at camp is our Yachad Inclusion Program coordinator and just comes with a wealth of knowledge. If there's any questions about that or any ways where we can help any child succeed at camp, please be in contact with us. And Michelle is just an amazing, amazing resource, and we're so happy that we have her on our team. And LaShondra Sims is our lead shadow, but she's also a real behavior specialist and works very closely with Michelle and all of us. And we're very excited about the team that we have. So when I did this program, when I created this PowerPoint, a number of last month, it was just around Passover, and I thought, I'll be really kind of cute and funny because it's Passover, and getting ready for Passover is funny for those that celebrate it. And there's the old Passover thing, the 4 questions, which is, why is this night different than all other nights, that we ask on the first and second night of Passover. But we go, why is this summer different than all other summers? And I included the Hebrew above. So when I was just debating whether to take this out of this session's PowerPoint, I decided not to because I had what to add to it. Why is this summer different than all other summers? And it's strange because the more you think about it, the more it is different, the more is the same. And I think all of it is an appropriate analogy. So bear with me on that. This summer, things are constantly changing. And I want to give you a few examples of this very recently. Last time when we met when we did this in March, that same week, the CDC released guidance that school physical distancing would be reduced to 3 feet. So, we updated our PowerPoint with that, but we also realized that the guidance, is constantly changing with that. Over the main things that we base our guidance on are the CDC recommendations, the state of Virginia's requirements, and also the American Camping Association's field guide. And the field guide is really a guide to operations, safe operations, updated recommendations for both day and overnight camps on how to run safely and successfully. Of course, today is Monday, and on Saturday, both the CDC and the American Camping Association updated their guidance. What we heard from the CDC was some more updates on what physical distancing, it got a little bit more specific about that, and I'll be happy to talk about that momentarily. The other guidance that we are going to get might be tomorrow, because apparently President Biden may be speaking about a mask mandate or an outdoor mask mandate. Short story is, guidance is changing. Last year when we were doing this, we knew so little, and everything that we learned and knew, we had to really kind of be flexible and change with it and just try to create another layer or another mitigation mechanism in order to make sure that camp happened. Here's the good news, that we are obviously going in the other direction right now. And even in the camp guide, in the ACA field guide, there was a section updated on the vaccine. But from March 26th, March 23rd, when we did this last time, to tonight, the reality is very different with the vaccine, where it is now readily available and accessible. And that part of the guidance about that hasn't been updated other than the efficacy. So there's a lot that's happening, and there's a lot that's still going to happen between now and the start of summer. And with that, I'll share, but everything is subject to change. We are constantly watching the situation, we're evaluating the situation. And while we want everyone to have fun, we also are first and foremost looking at the safety and security of everybody that is in our community and what is best for that. So, but that doesn't mean we can't have fun and adapt while we try to anticipate changes. Everything that I'm going to present tonight is true and current as of tonight, April 26th, 2021. If tomorrow this report is outdated, tomorrow this report is outdated. That's unfortunately the reality that we're dealing with. So we are standing with that. So we are now accepting that things are constantly changing. Oh, sorry. So say things weren't changing. In all summers, and so much of COVID, we forgot about just kids being kids. All summers at Camp JCC families can expect their campers to enjoy their favorite activities, try new things, and build new skills. Get wet and occasionally dirty. Apologize in advance. Sorry. Build self confidence, resilience. Sorry, empathy. Be outside. Be active and loud. Actually, that was part of the guidance that was talked about this weekend. I'll cover that. About being loud and outside as opposed to loud and inside. Um, and that will not change. And of course, having cool and caring counselors, sharing in a sense of belonging, being a part of a kind and caring community, celebrating learning and expressing values experientially, making new and connecting with old friends and having fun will not change. Those things, no matter what, are going to happen. So, really, to the crux of what is going to be different is this summer, we are implementing, this is a very technical term that many of you may or may not have heard, but it's all mostly things that you have seen are non-pharmaceutical interventions, and we're just going to call them NPIs for short. It's an industry term, and that will include masking, physical distancing, cohorted groups, frequent hand washing and sanitation, daily screening and temperature checks, and outdoor programming. And I'll cover all of those things, and certainly as questions come up, please feel free to put them in the chat, or I'll also be happy to answer them for you at the end of the session. So masking, another Passover joke. On all other summers, one is not asked to bring a single mask to camp. Why this summer too? So this is what it says right now. Campers and staff will wear masks for all indoor and outdoor activities. Masks will not be worn at the pool or whether eating or drinking. And all campers must bring a second clean cloth mask in case the first one gets wet or soiled. So I want to touch on this for a couple of reasons. A few months ago, there was some organizations that were recommending double masking, just in general. The American Camping Association did not go with that recommendation. They still stayed with a single cloth mask. Sometimes we've seen other things like that. So with that being said, this is just a perfect example of how guidance, you hear certain things, guidance changes, and guidance can go another direction. And by tomorrow, this may also go another direction. But I want to also emphasize a couple common sense points with masks. Any issues that come up with masks are going to be handled at an age appropriate level and kindly and with respect and honor. And there's a number of months ago now, there was and actually I think there's been another one since, an incident on an airplane where a 2-year-old did not have a mask on or couldn't keep it on, and the family was asked to leave the flight. That's not the approach we take. If there's challenges or issues, we're going to work with you on them. And we also understand that developmentally, different children of different ages have different needs and things that are feasible. And also certain activities, are going to lend to wearing masks at various points. And, just even a safety issue is that when masks become wet, they become harder to breathe in. So if there could, where we're talking about pool, there will also be water activities. There will be other things, but all of these NPIs are meant to provide a layer of protection. But every one of these things has a hole in it where it's not enough. So all of these things layered upon top of each other are what are really going to keep us as protected as possible this summer. So this is what our mask guidance is for right now in regards to outdoor and indoor. And I'll make one more statement that there has been a lot of studies and research done. And you can find these things online, also on the American Camp Association website, which is camp.org, I think, or com, I'm one of the two, about a lot of studies that happened in summer camps, about things that went well in terms of COVID mitigation and things that didn't go well. Regardless of whatever the recommendation ends up being tomorrow, there was very clear evidence and a correlation to camps that required masks inside and outside to low COVID spread. So I would rather always err on the side of being more conservative and letting up if the situation allows. But with that being said, we are always going to follow the guidance and what we know to be best practices. Physical distancing. So again, this one was when I created the slides last time for our session in late March, I took out the mark about 6 feet because CDC was starting to waver on that and announced 3 feet for school. But let's not talk about the tape measurement for a second. Every effort will be made to keep campers sufficiently distanced when appropriate throughout the camp day. Activities that don't promote social distancing will be modified. Because we're closer to 3 feet, there's a lot more that we can do. And if we are outside and we are in cohorted groups, which we're talking about, there's going to be many layers of protection for this, which is exciting. Some of the more specific examples of 3 feet, they made, this was the recommendations that came out this weekend and some of the guidance, that they made very clear that 3 feet isn't just 3 feet with everybody. It is 3 feet within a cohorted group. And they still recommended keeping more distance during eating or with adults. And they also made a very clear point to say 3 feet within a group, but a 6 foot separation between other groups. So we are assuming that recommendation stays true. That is something we are going to be holding and following. But with that being said, we a lot of times our kids are walking through the halls and outside, they'll use zombie arms or airplane arms. These things can be fun. We don't have to take a militant approach. We don't have to take a tape measure approach. There's a lot of really easy, fun ways where we can maintain the distance and keep the spirit of fun in camp going. Cohorted groups. This is something that when one hears the term cohorts or same groups, it means a lot of things to a lot of people. And it also talks about exposure. There's a lot of different things to unpack with this. So I'm going to go through it, and then I'm going to give a little bit more explanation as to how it works. Campers will remain with one group for the duration of the summer. Camp groups will not physically mix with each other. Schedules will be designed to maintain physical separation between the groups. Visual markings will keep groups and cohorts physically separate from one another, including during morning and aftercare. Cohorting has been one of the leading things to leading Npis in protecting people. And then one of the nice but also not nice things about cohorting is that it allows for easily contact tracing. And if there is, heaven forbid, a breakout, it allows us to isolate and close down maybe specific groups as opposed to the entire camp. It allows us to really pinpoint and limit interactions unnecessarily. Unfortunately, COVID has been a numbers game. The more people one interacts with, the higher the chance physically interacts with, the greater the chance of one receiving or the virus was. And just that was a pure numbers part about COVID. So with cohorting, this also reduces the amount of people and children each group and each counselor get to physically interact with, just reducing that number. And also it prevents it prevents things from the outside coming through that group. So with that being said, with cohorted, and I don't want to spend too much time on this right now, but we are going to be very protective of camp groups and camp areas, and only authorized camp people and pre-screened EJFT and JCC staff are going to be anywhere near camp groups. So that unfortunately means where we normally would love parents to be part of our visitors for special programs, and there might be a few things in the summer. Um, Parents aren't going to be allowed into areas with that campers are in during camp hours. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't arrange something beforehand to make sure that you and your children are comfortable with the surroundings. But in order to minimize exposure and to keep all groups as safe as possible, these are the groups, and we are keeping those groups as tight as possible. With that being said, we really, if your child or prospective camper has a friend in a group that they really want to be with, please send those requests to me in advance, and we will be happy to honor them, because unfortunately we can't really switch between groups for that very reason. So once a camper is assigned to that group, that will be that group, and that is how that will work. This is a challenge for us logistically on the back end, but this is the small price we have to pay in order to make sure that we get to have camp and keep camp running and make sure everyone gets to enjoy the activities and keep people as safe as possible. So, and hopefully this is the last summer we ever have to do this, if all goes according to plan. But that's what cohorting means. That's what cohorting means to our camp program, and that is how we're going to use that NPI for mitigation. The next one is frequent hand washing and sanitation. So a few of these things you may have heard before, and I also want to clear up some things that we're hearing on the news and some guidance. Our schedule is designed so that hand washing and sanitation happen before and after every single activity, that it is an intentional, deliberate part multiple times during the day. We are also sanitizing all art supplies, writing utensils, classroom materials, and sports equipment. Anything that campers can use or touch or be around, any spaces, we're going to be sanitized before and after. We will also be sanitizing high-touch areas frequently. There's been a lot of coverage recently about the reports that surface spreading is not as significant as spreading through close contact. Well, that is true. We also know that the chance is not zero, that the virus could be transmitted through surfaces. With that, it has been stated and known that it is mostly spread through close contact. There has not been any change in the ACA, the American Camping Association, or CDC's guidance for operation of camp in regards to sanitizing and sanitizing equipment and protecting and cleaning surfaces. There has not been any change made to that. One change that we did see was that there was a section about physical barriers that was actually removed, for groups, in terms of that. But the standards that we are taking to keep everybody safe in terms of surfaces, hand washing, sanitation have not changed. And I don't know that the guidance will change on that, despite the knowledge and news that surfaces are not nearly the threat or as high of a transmission area as they once were thought to be. So daily health, we are going to be doing daily health screenings and temperature checks. The exact format of how we'll announce to you at a later date. Part of what we do in that, and we've very rarely seen any fevers as we have taken temperatures as for people coming in. But what it definitely allows us to do is to just look at a camper's overall wellness and just get a sense on how people are doing. And it's just one layer, and we know things could change. We also know that sometimes everything is fine, but then you hear from a friend that somebody that they may have been with may have been exposed to COVID. If there is any doubt about anything, whether somebody's not feeling well, whether someone may have been exposed, whether somebody might have any symptom, if there's any symptoms or there's any doubt, keep them out. Say that again. If there's any symptoms or any doubt, keep them out. And then give me a call, because we can talk through it, and there will be some steps, but sometimes that, it ends up being something that is benign. But I would rather us go through um, going through our whole process and just understanding what it is and what we are dealing with, and ensuring safety. And if that takes a couple of days, great. If it takes a couple of weeks, great. If it takes a couple of hours, great. But I would rather us go through everything to make sure that we have done everything to make sure that we are not exposing anybody at camp to the best of our knowledge and ability. With that being said, we know that there's a lot that's changing with the vaccine, but there are still CDC guidelines and recommendations, and I'm sure they're going to change. But mitigating the spread of COVID is all of our responsibility. So we all need to do our part to keep our communities safe and follow CDC recommendations. And it's a nice also way of saying let's not put ourselves unnecessarily at risk, because that puts everybody in our community at risk. And and the kids need camp more than ever, and that's why we really need to do, all of us do our part. This is a community responsibility. So this is a rudimentary clip art drawing of getting back outdoors, and we have altered this is something that we wanted to do anyways as part of our camp program. We wanted to alter our camp program to bring things more back outdoors. Kids have been inside long enough this school year. They need fresh air. They need to run around. They need to yell. They need to cheer. And there's so many different things that used to be inside that there's no reason it can't be done outside. So we need to get the kids outside and having fun. We want having water play. We are building some shade structures, some tents, and there will occasionally be some indoor activities. So with that being said, there are designated spaces. Like, so if it's thunder and lightning, of course, we're not going to stay outside. And of course, the COVID guidelines all recommend fresh air and ventilated and outdoor spaces. So this is just as good of an opportunity to have our program go back outside more intentionally than ever before. But we're not going to torture anybody for the sake of torturing anybody. We're not going to keep people uncomfortable and not well in the heat for the sake of being in the heat. Drinking water is going to be a huge part of the day. Hydration games are a huge part of what we're going to do, and getting wet in water activities. I think I mentioned that. So, and I neglected to mention that last time, and that was on me. And that's because that's something that's supposed to be a part of camp anyways, making sure everybody's drinking water and playing those games and looking after each other, looking after our campers and our fellow staff members' well-being. So that is a big part of it. It's fun, but sometimes we just get focused on COVID and what we need to do, that we neglect some very basic things that are just part of the summer. And being outside is part of the summer, staying hydrated and healthy and having fun is part of the summer. But there are indoor areas that we can go if we need to, due to weather, and also if we just see that something that it just might be too much on a given day, or for something for a child. We're not going to make a stand for the sake of making a stand. The idea is to make this a really amazing, special, fun summer program, not to torture anybody through heat, despite the heat in Virginia during the summer. So it's important to note that, and we're really excited about it. So what are the things that we are expecting to do? A lot of our camp favorites, again, music, swim, sports, art, special theme, dress-up days, mini golf, fishing, gaga, and much more. Let me touch on swim for a second. Yes, we are going back to instructional swim and recreational swim. That is back a part of our program. We have modified it. And in order to make sure that we are maintaining our cohorts, keeping our numbers down, and keeping physical distance as required in our pool. So we're really excited about that. And some camps that did operate, including the one that I did offer swim this past summer, but almost nobody offered instructional swim due to just the lack of standards and lack of what we had new at that point. And that's okay, but that's always been a staple of Camp JCC, and we're really excited that this is coming back, and we're going to continue it. Now, there's a lot of things that we can control, and a lot of things that we can't, a lot of things we can account for, a lot of things that we can't. And unfortunately, despite my best efforts, hopefully by bringing this up here, I'm not going to have any problems with it. I can't control the weather. When there's thunder and lightning out, obviously that will close down all of our pools. Hopefully it will not be during the times where the kids really need to be in the pool. We can just pray for rain later in the summer and later in the afternoon. But those are just things that are out of my control. Everything else, I don't neither here nor there. So A big staple of Camp JCC has been a culture of field trips and going to various things and for different age groups. And those are fun. And I'm going to flat out say that we're continuing to monitor the situation, but this is only going to be likely for older groups and mainly for nature destinations. The recommendations by the American Camp Association are still to avoid crowded public places. And when we go off site, and it is appropriate for some of our older groups, and maybe not as much, maybe not to the same places, but we want to also be able to control the environment that the kids are in and make sure that keeping everybody as safe as possible. There's a level that we can't control in some of those larger public areas. And we want to keep that in mind as we travel, but we are doing those things for our older groups. But this is something that we have to scale back this summer, just flat out, and there's no way around it. So it's there for some of our older groups. It's going to be more nature based. There will be one really fun experiences, but we're not going out for the sake of going out, and we're not probably doing a large public amusements that we might in the past. Hopefully we do again in the future. Late stage and undernight, that's also a staple of our program. We are continuing to monitor and assess the situation. I may have said that a few times. Might say it again. It will likely be happening in some form. We are having a special event for families, part of our film fest on June 24th, which will be socially distant. So more on that. But we certainly view undernights or late stay that we can offer camp programming, following COVID protocols and keeping groups separate, but making sure everyone has a fun time and has things to do. We don't see why we couldn't do that after hours at camp and create a special, memorable experience. But stay tuned as we don't have anything to announce about that specifically yet. Overnights, I'm just going to be polite and say we're continuing to monitor and assess the situation, but it's probably not going to happen. It's unless there is a massive change in everything. So let's not do it. And why do we hope to resume that as soon as possible? But why do I bring that up? Just because that is something that our campers do look forward to, our older campers, and it is something that builds community. It is something that helps build independence, and it's a part of our camp culture. So believe me, I might be sounding like a downer on it right now, but I'm all about overnights. And the second we can start doing those again, we would like to. But we recognize we're in a situation this year, and we want to make sure that we have the best experience for everybody, but also while minimizing risk. And there's a lot of unknowns at this point. So I'm going to again be polite and say we're going to continue to monitor and assess. The hours of the Camp JCC day are 8:30 to 3:30. Morning car line is from 8:30 to 8:45. Afternoon car line is 3:30 to 3:45. We have before care starting at 7:30, going to 8:30, and after camp care from 3:30 to 6. Please note that an old version of the brochure had the times listed as 6:30 in the morning, staying until 6:30 at night. Those are no longer the case. These are the updated hours. If this is a concern or a question, please be in contact with me, and I'll be happy to address that and work on a solution for that. And it is important to know that even though there will be extended care and entire groups won't be there, or parts of the groups won't be there, we are still maintaining cohorts, and we're not allowing campers from one cohort to mix with another. Normally, this isn't something that gets covered in open house, but in light of all that is happening, it's important to go through this, and also important to put everybody at ease. All cancellation requests must be in writing 14 days before the start of the first day of camp to be eligible for a refund. There is a deposit with that. So that is there, and this information can be found also on www.campjcc.org, campjcc.org. And on that site, you will also find a link to register and our brochure. But in the brochure is where all of this is listed. And you can find that. And obviously, if there's any questions, feel free to be in contact with me. And then this is the most important thing in light of this year. And again, hopefully this is the last time we ever have to talk about this for this year, or not for this, but beyond this year, and that's our COVID refund policy. If your camper needs to quarantine because of, oops, sorry, because the camper or anyone in your household exhibits symptoms of COVID-19 is awaiting test results, or test positive, or exposed to someone who has been diagnosed, you will receive a refund of 100% of prorated camp days or camp fees missed for those days. We always want to be err on the side of caution, and we don't want anybody to have this be the worry. We have enough worries, um, in terms of this. So if there needs to be someone needs to be held out because of COVID, or not sure, or we ask somebody based on information that we received or in contact information, we want to make sure that you understand that these days will be prorated back. Um, and unfortunately, it's tricky with all those things. When I can't predict how that will happen or when that happens. We've seen instances, and I can talk more about that in the questions and the answers, but no one case or even one scare or even one potential exposure is the same. So, but we're always going to err on the side of caution. And the most important thing is to be communicating with me. Oh, and I forgot to mention this before. Discretion will always be maintained. We are not going to release names or anything like that. Just come tell me, let me know what's happening. Tell me the truth, the whole truth, honestly, and we are going to assess it as how we need to assess it. But we are not going to be naming or saying anything like that. We're just going to do what we need to, make the decisions that we need to, and make sure everybody is safe. So discretion will always be maintained in terms of that. So what else? Toward the end of the month of May, or middle to the end, there will be a parent handbook available for registered campers. This is going to cover much more of the day-to-day elements of camp, how to go through the car line, and who to call for what, and what are policies, what to bring to camp every day. I don't want to spend so much time in the weeds with that today, because this is much more of a general session about how we're going to do that, but I'm happy to answer any of these things. So the day-to-day parent guide will be sent out toward the middle or the end of May. And we are also going to be having at some point another orientation session for registered families. What is that? That is going to be a similar session to this, but much more about things that you need to know for the camp day, much more in the weeds, much more specific things to bring, things not to bring, things to account for, and schedules, and how to handle those things. So we just want to give everybody an opportunity to do that. And normally in the past, let's put it all out there, this is something that we would do in person. We would, have everybody come. Here's an open house. Hear everybody, meet, do anything like that, and ask all your questions. And unfortunately, just our ability to gather in that way is compromised this year. So we are exploring a few other ways to do that, but we don't want to miss an opportunity for the information to be conveyed. So please know that will be happening at some point. And that information will be forthcoming, but that information will be very specific to camp and a camp day and a camp week. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to Sierra, who I'm sure has some questions that she's going to kindly moderate and ask, and I'm sure chime in on as well. So did we mention Sierra? We're pretty high on Sierra. Hi, Sierra. How are you?
Thanks. I can't help myself sometimes. Sometimes I just chime in. I'll try not to though. I'll let.
No, you are welcome. We would expect nothing less. I'm surprised we made it this far.
um, yes, and I do want to give just a warning to everybody. It is bedtime here, like I'm sure it is for many of you where you are. So if I am interrupted by a child running in to kiss me goodnight, I'll try to mute myself quickly, but that might happen. So we do have some questions. I'm just going to start at the top. I've been answering some in the Q&A. If you look in the typed answered questions, I've answered some easily
Mhm.
answerable ones there. But here are some that I wanted to ask out loud. So mask requirements. Is every age camper going to be required to wear a mask? or is it going to be based just on the Virginia requirements of 5 and up?
So I'm going to answer this strictly on Monday, April 26th, which means I have a feeling this is going to change. Currently, the Virginia guidance is saying two, and that really will encompass every camper and every counselor as part of our program. With that being said, we know that two is a very young age, and we know that age has we'll be transitioning with that. We'll be working with them again. We're going to be taking a common sense, developmentally appropriate, compassionate approach to this. So we don't want that to be the worry, but that is what has been mandated, and it's not something that really I have a lot of flexibility on. So we're just going to continue to watch that, and I'm happy to continue this conversation about what's happening and how we're going to go forward from there.
I want to just add in, I'll chime in, that there are two different things you're going to hear a lot. There's going to be mandates and there's going to be recommendations. So at Camp JCC, we're going to always err on the side of caution with the recommendations. So even though it's not mandated, if it's considered best practice for camps, then that's what we're going to be following.
Unless it's
Okay.
mandated, and then we have to.
Right. Then if it's mandated, we have to. But
Yep.
if it's more
Right.
strict as recommended, then um, okay, how are the cohorts separated? So can you give us a little bit of a play-by-play for how that would look at camp?
Yes. So that will depend on age, and also it'll depend on certain numbers that we achieve. So I'm going to speak to the older groups, which are grades first through teens, and because these are the groups that are going to be primarily outside and more on the go. So these groups are going to be divided by grade and by age. The first set of cohorts will be either first, second, or a combination of first and second grade campers, and we're going to divide that based on parent recommendations, based on school recommendations, and based on requests, and create that from there. So it's really important, since we don't always know every child, and we also don't know who every child is friends with. It's really, really important that you share with us if there's somebody that you want your campers to be with. But essentially, the cohorts for older groups will be first and second grade, third and fourth grade, fifth and sixth and teens, and there might even be some modification between fifth and sixth and teens and how that's broken up, or how that's even cohorted as a whole. So, but really essentially by age. For the younger kids, it is going to be strictly by age and the entering year. And also, because there are different developmental needs for each age, a 2-year-old, there will be two-year-old classrooms with a very different ratio than the older classrooms. Most of the 2-year-olds that come are we know from our toddler program, but the ones that we don't, we are also in consultation with, and we create those groups based on what we know and socially, and also based on schedules. For those, and in order to be in the 2-year-old group, it's essentially a rising two, but you have to already be two to be in that group. We don't have 1-year-olds in that group, and you can still be two. Say you've finished your 2-year-old year at the J. We have a rising 3-year-old group, so you might be like 2 and 3/4 or 10, and you would be in the rising 3-year-old group. So then the groups change, but it's essentially divided by age at that point. And if you're part of the Straylet school, there will be input from the Straylet staff of who should be together, but essentially by age and parent and other recommendations and other social considerations.
So I'm glad that you answered it that way because I was interpreting the question a different way. So we got two different kinds of
Oh,
answers
good.
this way.
I'm curious.
So, and that might be what was meant. But I was also thinking about when you're saying the cohorts are going to be separate, what does that actually mean? So if you're picturing, I know that you and I have talked a lot about going through the building and keeping cohorts separate out there. If we're going to have any larger, like all camp type activities, how will those cohorts stay separate through like the morning Boker Tov, for example, or any other activities on the field? So how will we keep those groups separate?
Right. So first of all, our camp day, including everything from swimming to eating to walking through the building, and we're finalizing these things right now, but based on what we know, is going to be very intentionally designed to make sure that no groups are really near each other in any close quarter situations, or really have to be anywhere within X amount of space of each other. For special things like a Boker Tove or an all camp, maybe game show. I want to make this clear for older camp, for some of those older kids, those types of programs. What we will be doing is physically distancing them and operating and keeping them slightly away from each other in very designated areas, and modifying their program where it can essentially, everyone will be looking forward at us and we be a part of it. So we are maintaining the physical distance and we are keeping the integrity of the cohort, and we keep everybody outside. So let's talk about a scenario here. Say it is pouring rain. The days of throwing everybody in camp in the multi-purpose room to watch a movie aren't happening. That's just not possible, because we need to be able to maintain and that separation and keep physical distancing. So there will be things like that, but essentially by using intentional designs and where people are going, having the schedule be designed so that really nobody is somewhere where they shouldn't be, or anywhere in close quarters. Um, and by making sure that when we are together, we are following rules of physical distancing and keeping the integrity of our cohorts.
Thank you. Okay. We have a few questions about swim, so I'm going to ask them, and if you need reminded about one of them, just let me know. So the first question is swim ratio counselor to child for the younger groups, those 2 and 3-year-olds. So that's very specific. Then getting a little bit more general, the water safety protocols. So what do we do at the JCC to help make sure that our campers are safe in the pool?
Well, that's actually an easier one than the first one. So that's, first of all, there are two things that keep me up at night no matter what. And one of them is the pool, and the other is transition to the pool. And third, whenever anybody is off site. So those are things that keep me up at night. So we do, there's a few things that we do that are very specific. So first of all, we always have trained lifeguards supervising the pool at all times. With that, during swim lessons, we have instructors that are teaching the class who aren't the lifeguards. So if they're teaching, you're teaching. If you're a lifeguard, you're lifeguard. You're watching the pool. On top of that, we have counselors, whether it be free swim or lessons in the water with the kids, because the counselors know the kids. They will know their swim level, what their abilities are, and also be able to call really quickly their names if there's a problem, or also be closer to grab if they need to. So, and then on top of that, we have counselors on deck who are they're acting like lifeguards, but they're not lifeguards, but they're being another pair of eyes and ears to everything that's happening. The idea is we need to know our campers. We know our campers. We're watching everything that is happening. And we are in there interacting with them, and there are several layers of protection with that. It's also important for me to add this year that in light of cohorting, in a light of doing a modified schedule, we are not going to see the big crowds at the pool that we have seen in the past. There is not going to be a lot of campers at the pool at any given time as opposed to previous years. A, because of the size of the groups. B, because we want to keep proximity. And C, we need to be able to keep people separate. So that's another way that we're going to do it, to also increase physical visibility. So that is that. In terms of swim lessons in swim groups, this will really depend on age. So I want to, for 2s and 3s, there's actually, so rising, let me say this, 2s and rising 3s. So somebody might be 2. There are actually 2 very, very different answers as to the ratios. So in the water, we are only, for rising 2s, we are only entering the 0 depth area. So we're not, it's going to be much more water play than it is going to be a lesson for that age, just because of what is required for that age and just their physical ability, just to hold up. So that is going to be very much more basic. They will have their counselors with them, several a designated lifeguard and a designated instructor. So we are looking at a 3-to-1 ratio right there. And that is really without going above, going in at a very 0 depth, not up until the fence. I forgot what the actual thing is, but it's in inches. So that is for that. For the 3s and the 4s, we the group size is 15 for that, and we have 2 counselors. So then within that, we divide into 2 to 3 groups with counselors. So We're it's a swim group of about 3 to 4, maybe 5, and we have an instructor, lifeguards, and counselors in the water with the kids. So I don't. I just got to do the math on that. But the idea is just kind of is the general coverage with that, but also with each group it's going to be different, and we might see more advanced swimmers in certain groups and other ones like that, where it might end up skewing things. And also for the older groups, that's something that is going to feel and look a little different. Um, where once upon a time we could have both first and second grade groups, just call it 40 kids, even though that's not the real number, go to the pool. They're all there at the same time. We break them up. Level one here, those who can do this stroke here. And, they have their instructor. They go to another end of the pool and they work on that skill and that, we assign them accordingly. That can't happen this year. And that's not going to happen this year. We are going to break up the groups according to the kids' ability, but within those very specific groups. So a group of 20 will get divided 4 or 5 times according to the campers' various levels. But obviously, depending on the age and the campers, that will determine what is happening with that.
Thank you. We only have about 5 minutes left. I won't
Oh my
be
gosh, time flies when you're having fun.
I know, it went fast.
I'll answer quick. I'll try to be less verbose.
I'm going to try to answer a few questions in the chat just so that we can get answers
Sure.
out there. But I'm going to preface it by saying that if I'm not being thorough enough for anybody in my answering, I will be sure to put Dave's email in the chat, and I speak for you, Dave, but he's always available and happy to answer your questions.
Let's
All right. So still with swim and swim instructions. So it says, my child cannot swim on her own yet, but others in her cohort may already know how to swim. Will the entire cohort receive swim instruction?
Yes.
Simple one.
Yep.
Yes. So, and I will add to that too, that the way that we do our swim instruction at the JCC is that we ability group a little bit there too, so that the instructors are going to be able to work with kids who are similar in ability if there's multiple instructors in a group.
All right, I'm seeing a few of these right now. I see Lisa put in 2, and I think they're kind of the same, so I'm going to answer them.
Okay, go ahead.
So this extended care. So for those, if you're a Straylets parent and you have a child in the early care program, your times will remain the same as what you had during the year. So that is important to note. If you need to change those times, you need to speak to Alyssa, but that only applies to those who are doing early care as currently part of Straylets program. Sorry, early years program as part of the Straylets program. Your times will not change. Audrey, your camp drop-off time is 8:30 in the morning for the regular start of camp, and 7:30 if you are doing AM extended care, starting from 7:30. These are good. These are good questions. Helen has asked, has a decision been made about meeting the counselors via Zoom? So we are working on that as we speak. When we have something, we will let you know. There's a lot. We are so glad that if that was you that brought that up, thank you. Whoever brought that up, we are so glad that was brought up in the last meeting. So we are just trying to work on exactly how that would work via Zoom, or if there is something else that is in person that is possible. Listen, none of it is the ideal or the easy way to do it. So stay tuned. But with that being said, a number of people have reached out about just kind of general concerns and seeing if they could do certain things. Just because we don't have an answer doesn't mean we might not be able to address some of those concerns. So why don't you contact me as well? Because I'll be happy to try to arrange something like that, whether it gets done en masse or on a personal level.
And that's it. That's all we have. Unless there's any more questions.
Everybody else out? Oh.
Yeah. What did one more come in?
My son is going to be early, and he's in kindergarten. Will my drop-off time?
Will it change? So we'll drop off and pick. So some people, if they're Straylets family, they're going to be heading into kindergarten. They're no longer going to be in that early year. The earlier programs are going to be the primary year program at Straylets. So we'll drop off and pick up time change because of the shift from.
So this is my answer, and if I'm wrong, I will get you this information. The kindergarten program is still part of our Camp Catan program, and that's still part of our a lot of the Straylift lower camp staff or Camp Catan staff. So my gut on that one is that we aren't going to change it for that age specifically, but we can address that on a case by case basis. But we also know that in many of the Straylift families and the Straylift school ask that we try to maintain as much consistency as possible, and that is part of the reason why we're doing that. So we're happy to address that separately, but anything that we were to say or cover with that would have to be in concert with the Straylift team. So we can't answer that unilaterally. But good question.
All right. Is there any other questions? You can put them into the chat now. We still have,
Or forever hold your email or email.
or just start entering into the email right now for Dave.
Yeah, I'll check in like an hour. I'm sure.
I said chat. Enter into the Q&A.
On the Q&A.
And Dave,
Ooh.
I don't have your phone number handy. Your direct line.
Let me see what my direct line is. See if I know it. I think I know what it is actually.
I can't even cheat to give you mine, but.
All right. So if you would like to call, there's a few ways to reach me. First of all, on our flyer or anything that you've seen, there's a phone number listed. That is our camp administrative line, and my colleague Sara picked that up. Feel free to call that. But and that's also the number that you'll find on our Camp JCC website, campjcc.org. My direct extension is 757 452 3186. Don't worry if the voicemail says something different, but it's 757-452-3186. But if you call the JCC's main line and you ask to speak to the camp team, it'll get to either Sara or I, and we will be able to answer your questions. Any voicemail gets actually sent to our email, so we will be able to do that.
There's one question I want to answer publicly. And then I think, Leslie, if it's okay, I'm going to ask Dave to answer yours one-on-one in an email or phone if you want to give him a call or an email. So the one question is, will parents be picking up outside or inside the JCC? And I did want to answer that publicly because it addresses a few other things too. And that will be our last question for the night. Thanks, Leslie.
Thanks.
For saying, Leslie said no problem. Some people can't see that. Thank you, Leslie.
Right.
And then this other question.
We appreciate them all. So.
Yes.
All right. Sorry, Sierra, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. So it's just whether or not parents will be picking up outside or inside the JCC, because that addresses a few other logistics for camp too.
Okay. So this is what's happening with that right now. There is going to be a car line system where we are keeping families out of the JCC. Obviously, if you're a JCC member, sorry, I thought I had my phone on silent. If you are a JCC member, you will be able to go in, but you won't be able to access camp areas. With that being said, we, as part of our parent handbook and part of the orientation, we're going to be going over all of those procedures with you and how that works. And some of those things we are actually finalizing. And I know Straylift has a great system going, but parts of those things need to get updated for summer camp. So as we do that, stay tuned. But the intent is to keep people outside of the JCC as much as possible, and to keep people out of camp areas as much as possible. So, thank you. And that's it.
Right.
They don't want to ask us it? I know they do.
Anybody else has questions, you can please send them to Dave's email or give him a call. I put the phone number and email address into the chat for you. And then I look forward to seeing you all this summer, and I'll let Dave say goodbye.
No, and listen, all of this is, as I said, a start of a conversation. We may have brought up some ideas that you hadn't thought of or other considerations. It's all good. We appreciate you being on here tonight to start this conversation, hear us out, and we want to hear what you have to say. And the only way to cover these things is by talking about it. So thank you so much. You can find all this information, our brochure, my contact information on how to register at campjcc.org. That is campjcc.org. And I just want to offer you a hearty thanks again. We know it's a late hour. We truly appreciate it. And we hope to see you this summer and talk to you plenty beforehand. Thank you so much for joining and have a wonderful evening.